Good morning and welcome to a On the Sofa event. Yes, it's a different time. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, but we hope anybody who is about can watch it live. If not, we are recording it, so it will be on YouTube channel later on today or tomorrow. So without further ado, let's bring Vic on, who as usual is our host.
Chris, a very good morning to you. Yes, hi to you. Very good morning to you. Yes, different time of the day, and yes, there we are.
Monday
for a very
morning.
special reason, to be fair.
Yes,
very special
exactly.
reason.
Yeah.
Yes.
So today we've got David Squires on, who is a cartoonist with The Guardian and a very big Swindon Town fan. So the reason we're doing it this early is because David's over in Australia. So he will explain whereabouts he is in a moment. So let's bring on David. Hi, David.
Hello, how are you?
Hi. Okay. So, right, I'm going to leave you with Vic, and I will be back at the end just to say goodbye. Okay.
Magic.
If there
Chris,
are
thanks for... sorry, go on.
leave them in the leave them in the comments, and we'll ask them as we go through the conversation. Okay. Thanks.
Chris, thanks very much indeed. David, welcome. Thank you very much indeed. Explain exactly where you are and what time of the day it is, please.
Yeah, I'm in Sydney in Australia, and it is 6 in the evening. So
6.
yeah, it's almost the time where I thought about cracking a beer, but I thought, you know, I'd try to keep the veneer of professionalism at least. It's off screen.
Well, hopefully a coffee will arrive for me in a moment, which at 9 o'clock in the morning is more appropriate, I think. Right, well, we'll get to why you're in Australia a little later on, if that's okay with you. But we should explain, you are a Swindon Town fan. You were born in Swindon, obviously. I hate to say this, but in 1974, which for me is quite young. Obviously, you're 46. I'm a lot older than that, so we'll leave it there. Not only are you an artist with The Guardian, but you produce books as well, such as this one here. I am the proud owner of Goalless Draws, illuminating the genius of modern football.
You're the one who bought it. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're the guy. Cheers.
I am the customer. Yeah, well done. How did it all start for you then? Because you know, to get a gig with The Guardian is no mean feat. But where did it all start?
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'd sort of would always been drawing and illustrating, and I sort of always knew that's what I wanted to do, and it's what I followed as a career with not much success, it's got to be said. And I'd almost kind of given up and was sort of just working on these small little football cartoons that I was sticking out on Twitter and Facebook and online and sharing those, and I built up like a little bit of an audience, bit of a following. And then it was really during the 2014 World Cup where I sort of, you know, you start a project and you sort of regret it after a while, but it turns out okay. So I decided to do a drawing for each match of the World Cup. So I started on that, and that really changed things for me. Like I think at the start of that tournament, I had maybe 1,000 followers on Twitter, and then by the end of it, I had, I don't know, 10, 14,000, and it grew. So I just kept doing that as the next season starts, and The Guardian got in contact and said, look, would you like to do these on a weekly basis? And here we are, pretty much. So yeah. Yeah,
it's an extraordinary thing to be involved in. I think you were involved in political cartoons as well at the beginning. Is that right? Something to do with the general election?
I did stuff for the Guardian for the general election in 2015. No, 2016. Or is it 17? I don't know. I mean, 17, they're every year.
17.
So you can, so you can take your pick. But there's always a political kind of edge and some political and social commentary in all of the cartoons. So it wasn't that much of a diversion to start doing that. But yeah, the bread and butter is the football cartoons. And I found that even when I was writing the political cartoons, there was still the occasional football reference in there that I just couldn't help myself. You know, that's the driving passion.
How difficult is it not to do one on Swindon every week? I mean, that's not your brief, clearly. But, you know, there's always, let's be honest, there's always a Swindon angle isn't there? So how difficult is it not to put it in?
The last 3 or 4 months, it was really hard, and I've often been chatting with my editor at The Guardian, who's a Plymouth fan, so has some, you know, sympathy for the struggles of lower league clubs. And so, you know, I've been saying for a while I wanted to do one about the situation at Swindon, and then, you know, it's a few times where I'd planned to do it and was about to, you know, start on doing one, and then say like the European Super League story broke, so it wasn't possible, and then it always just seems there's something in the way. But you're right, it is often tempting to stick a Swindon reference in there. Often I'll do it sort of subtly. I'll stick in the name of a former player, or I might, if ever I'm drawing a generic stand, it usually ends up being the Arkle stand. But there is one benefit to the fact that Swindon, that the county ground hasn't really been developed in any major way for, you know, almost 30 years, is that I can still draw that stadium from memory. It's, you know, there's a new burger van in the corner, or the scoreboard changes occasionally, but it's, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, a Plymouth fan, eh? Of course, I live near Exeter, so interesting connection. Let's talk about how it all started for you then, because Anna Tursley, who is a regular member of our panels here on the Sofa events, of course, she was co-founder of the 69er, and fanzines are very important in your early development, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. I mean, I'm hoping that none of those early cartoons that I submitted to the 69er are still in existence. I think the first thing I had published was would have been 92, I think, when I'd have been 17, which was a cartoon about Duncan Shearer leaving to go to Blackburn. It's nice to talk to you guys, because you're the only people who really understand the injustice of that whole situation. The fact that, you know, they just came along and nicked our best player so that you know, we wouldn't have him, or a promotion rival wouldn't have him. So I did this cartoon about Duncan Shearer. I think looking back now, I know what I was like then, and I know it would be full of typos. Like the cartoons I do now, thankfully, you know, they're read by a proofreader and an editor before they go up. I didn't have that luxury back in the days of the 69er cartoon. So I know it will be full of typos. And I also think, looking back, my target for that cartoon was completely wrong. So I was laying all the blame at the door of poor old Duncan Shearer, who obviously just wanted to further his career. He's probably getting a lot more money to go and sign for a bigger club, who, you know, although they were beneath us in the table at the moment, there's probably a fair chance that they were going to go up as they did. And I think I just completely went for him, whereas really the target should have been broader. So as much as I, you know, wanted to do this as a career, it's fortunate in a way for me that I didn't really get a chance at that young age, because I hadn't really found my voice. I hadn't really formed any opinions about the world other than the most sort of superficial of things. I mean, some people would probably say not much has changed now, but with that Duncan Shearer one, I remember it was so great just seeing it in print, getting such a thrill from it, and seeing my friends reading it and laughing at it, and then maybe looking down the terrace and seeing someone else sort of flicking through it. And I really sort of enjoyed that feeling. It's like I felt famous for an afternoon.
Yeah, an amazing time. I remember interviewing him on the Saturday before he moved to Blackburn, and he was just shy of equaling Don Rogers' goal scoring record, which I think he was very much looking forward to breaking. And of course, then it all broke that he was off to big money Blackburn in those days. Of course, they just had money to splash about, and then sadly for Duncan, it was a Shearer of another name who made his name at Ewood Park, wasn't it? Which is a great shame. And of course, as you say, scuppered Swindon's promotion bid that season. And had Duncan stayed, I'm pretty sure we would have featured at least in the playoffs, if not have gone up. So a great shame, really. Hang on. This is from Pete. Bad news on the 69er fanzine drawings, David. Anna submitted a copy of every edition to the National Archives, so they are preserved forever. How do you feel about that?
Not great. I think I did another one as well about a a policeman who was really overly officious and would tell Swindon fans to sit down if they started singing, and the big reveal at the end that he was a sad and lonely Oxford fan, which again, not the most subtle of cartoons, but I was 17, so. But no, if there's some way of destroying that National Archive, that would probably be, good.
So, can you remember your first game? What was it?
First game, I thought you might ask me. Yeah, it was 1984, and it was we played Tranmere, Swindon Tranmere. It was a 1-1 draw. I'd have been maybe 8 or 9, and made my dad take me. My dad isn't a football fan at all. No one in my immediate family is really into football, so I nagged him to take me along. And I don't remember anything about the game, but I do recall that we had seats in the north stand, and we were right down at the end near the town end. And he said, "Oh, these seats aren't great. Let's move further to the middle." So off we shuffled down to the director's box, climbed over like the little fence, and just parked in these seats. It's sort of padding and quite nice. And we probably sat there for 4 or 5 seconds before a steward came along and asked us to see our tickets and jogged us on. He was quite polite, but I do remember being in trouble. But so yeah, and that was it. I can't say I was really hooked immediately. I don't remember it being a particularly exciting game, and I probably didn't pay much attention to it. And that would have been the pre-Lee Macari days, I think. So it's pretty low attendance. I looked up the attendance not that long ago, and I think there was 4,000 there. So, it's nice that I was in there, and I think that was our worst season ever, right? I think that's when we finished 18th in Division 4. So it's good to get in at the basement, and
low expectations. Yeah, that would have been Ken Beamish's time as manager, I think, wouldn't it? And that was just before Lou Macari joined, of course. He joined in the summer, so 84, 85, his first season. Yeah, it seems, people talk about big crowds at Swindon, but, we've all been there in the days when like 2,000-3,000 have been in the county ground. And as you said, you could find a seat in the North Stand anywhere if the steward didn't move you. So when did you first get hooked then? Because I'm going to ask you about Alan McLaughlin, obviously. Alan didn't fit into Lou Macari's style, but when did you first get hooked, as it were?
I probably got really hooked in that as Swindon rose through the division. So obviously it was brilliant under Macari, that 86 season. I was only really going to sort of 2 or 3 games a season because, like I say, my parents weren't really into it. And I'd sometimes go with friends, and their parents would take me along. I remember going to see one game with a lad in my class and his dad. And when we were going into the ground, he said, right, boys, you're at the football now, so you can say whatever you want. You can swear. You can be as abusive as you like. You've got carte blanche. He probably didn't use that phrase because we were like 8, but go for it. And I mean, we must have really gone for it. And the people sat around us must have just thought, who are these yobs? Just the stuff coming out of our mouth. We were barely watching the game. And I think we were playing Wigan. So maybe that was in the 3rd division. I can't remember. But I didn't really get hooked until our first season in the 2nd tier, still under Macari. And right at the start of that season, another friend of mine asked me to go along with him and his dad, and they had season tickets. And rather than sitting in the North Stand, they stood in the Shrivenham Road. And that was it. That was when I was there, and that sort of more of a communal human experience. And when there was a big crowd, as there was, being sort of dragged along a bit, and just more physical interaction. You're closer to the players, and we'd go and stand down the front because we were small, because we were still pretty young. And you just see the beads of sweat flying off Jimmy Quinn's head as he flicks on another long ball. So it's a more visceral experience, and really from then I was hooked. And I don't think I barely missed a home game from the start of the 87-88 season. probably through until I went to university when I was 19. So that would have been 94. So so there's a good sort of 7 years where I was there pretty much every game. And yeah, completely hooked.
Yeah, that would have been the old Shrivey Road stand, of course, which the older shop military tattoo building, which is no longer there. It's the Don Rogers stand for those of a younger persuasion. Facilities weren't great in that, were they? I mean, they weren't. It wasn't exactly, but it was football. It was real football, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think I still got so much affection for that stand because after a while, the friend who I'd been going with, they moved away, so I found a new group of friends, and it was just like a second home for all of those years. I knew every nook and cranny. I knew. In fact, my granddad, who was one of the only people who liked football in my family, he used to go up the top, and he stopped going when that whole bit was condemned. I think after the Bradford fire, they decided that it was probably unsafe to have these rickety wooden seats in a stand made of corrugated iron that would shake in the wind. So but yeah, he jacked it in after that. But I loved that, like I say, the green corrugated iron, and it was pretty basic, but yeah, it served a purpose.
Yeah, it certainly did. And of course, some will remember the fact they used to call games off if it was too windy because of the danger of the stand. So therefore, Lou Macari then departs, goes to West Ham. And then the shock news that having watched this player in the 1978 World Cup be magnificent in midfield for Argentina, all of a sudden, somebody called Ozzy Ardiles arrives. And Alan McLaughlin, who had gone off to Torquay on loan and famously took part in the game where Torquay United's league status was preserved by the police dog. In fact, you've drawn that, haven't you? There is a cartoon that you've done of that.
I did a tribute to Alan recently when he passed away, and yeah, I didn't actually realise that he'd played in that game until I was listening to a great interview on the Loathed Strangers with him. And it just seemed so typical that he was there and involved, and really, you can imagine while he was on loan there, he'd have been playing with all of his heart, the way he did when he was at Swindon and everywhere else he played. So that was a great reveal to find out he was there. But yeah, when Ozzy Ardiles joined Swindon, it's funny because he'd played for, again, Blackburn at Swindon just at the end of that last season. And I think he must have been sort of diving about a bit, because I remember the Shrivey Road stand giving him hell's abuse, like the whole of the second half, just on his case. So when, like, a few weeks later, we read Ozzy Ardiles, he's going to be our new manager, it was like, oh, okay, we didn't put him off. That's a good sign. And yeah, just that transformation in that style of football from, spring to summer, like 6 weeks holiday, whatever. And it's not like now where you get snippets of action and, you see bits of training, and you can watch pre-season friendlies here and there. Really, it was such a surprise seeing them turn out for that first game of the new season against Sunderland. And, they're playing lovely little triangles in midfield. And, this player, Alan McLaughlin, who he had featured under Macari, but not, we hadn't really seen what he could do. And suddenly he's running the midfield and, these lovely passes, just a ball of energy. And I think, and I don't say it with too much hype, that I think he was one of the best midfielders in the country that season. Honestly, he was fantastic. And to get into that Ireland squad as well, to show his worth to a manager like Jack Charlton, who you would think wouldn't be naturally inclined to pick a small, hard-working, skillful midfielder when the ball was often 20 foot above the midfield, just showed his worth as a player, as a man. Just great times.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. I don't know if you attended Andy Rowland's testimonial, but it was the first evidence we've got of the Ozzy Ardiles style of football. And I think everybody in the crowd sort of gasped and thought, what's this? I mean, it was poetical to watch it at times, and obviously we'd had a different style in the Lou Macari, which, you know, let's be honest, none of us would knock, would we? But the difference in styles is extraordinary, and players like Lee Barnard suddenly were given this new lease of life, and Alan McLaughlin, as you say. But he became your hero for not just what you saw on the football field, but for another reason. What was that reason?
Yeah, this would have been 86. So it was, I did one of these half-term football courses where, you know, you go and dribble around a few cones and have a shot at a bored goalkeeper. And at the end of that, there was this presentation evening where you all got a certificate and a medal. And I'd wrongly thought it was a Bobby Charlton thing, but it wasn't. It was an FA thing. And there was different sort of, it was like getting your swimming badges, you know, you'd progress through. And I did the most basic level, which would be like the equivalent of, as I just said, dribbling around some cones. But I treated it like it was, that was winning the Ballon d'Or, you know. So it was some sports centre. We went along and got our little badges and certificates. And my mum fished out the photo recently, and Alan McLaughlin was handing out the awards with Fraser Digby. And I knew who Fraser Digby was, but didn't quite know who Alan McLaughlin was, because he'd only just signed. I think he'd only just signed a few weeks before. But yeah, I always followed his career from there. So I was delighted when him and Fraser really, you know, showed their worth. It's funny, like I asked my mum if she could dig out the photograph of Alan Mack giving me the certificate and the pin badge. And what I'd forgotten was that I was wearing a lime green cardigan, like real sort of mid-80s style. I had a Peter Coyne stroke Jesper Olsen style mullet, like a big blonde mullet, lime green woolen cardigan, Burton's finest skin tight trousers with sort of a silver fleck pattern, and all the other kids were wearing tracksuits. In my mind, I'd always thought that I was like, we were all dressed up and dapper. When I saw the photograph, the group photograph, I was like, I'm the only one. I'm the only one with style out of all. No. So thankfully, what it didn't reveal in that photograph was I was also wearing a thin leather tie, which, yeah.
Well, you know, we've all done things like that in the past, and some of us still dress in an embarrassing fashion, so I wouldn't worry about it, David, at all. That side, of course, then went through, ironically, to beat Blackburn in the semi-finals, which, if you think back to what our discussion was earlier, it's quite ironic, really, and rather nice, to play Sunderland in that final. I assume you were there for the 1990 playoff final. Again, a team that graced Wembley and played some of the best football you've seen at the famous old stadium. And it was a 1-0 massacre, let's be fair, wasn't it? And your hero gets the goal. Yeah.
It's interesting hearing him talking about that goal again on that Loathed Strangers interview, where, you know, he wasn't having it at all that that it took a deflection. I mean, he admitted it was a deflection, and eventually sort of conceded that, yeah, maybe Tony Norman would have saved it. But yeah, Swindon, as you say, absolutely battered them that day. And obviously what followed is still, you know, so painful. It's actually the anniversary of the demotion today. So I was thinking about, you know, where I heard the news and what I was doing. And I was actually playing. We knew that the announcement was due to come, and so we went to the end of the street and we're playing football as we did every night on the sort of waste ground at the end of the street. And waste ground, I'm making it sound more sort of romantic and northern than it was. It's a nice bit of grass. And suddenly some cars came past and they were beeping their horns, and we assumed it's okay, it's all going to be all right. You know, we're their Swindon fans are beeping the horn. It turned out it was just a traffic traffic incident, and then someone's brother came around and said we've been demoted to the third division, and like we assumed for hours that he was teasing us, winding us up, but yeah, it's absolutely devastating to realize that they've actually done us 2 divisions. So obviously to 1 on appeal, but that team would have made such an impact in the first division. I know it's nice to be able to say that because we'll never know, but I really do believe it was a stronger team than the one that eventually did go up, or the one that eventually did play in the Premier League a couple of years later.
I think the difference was also the fact that the difference between one league and the next league wasn't so big at that point. And I think certainly, you know, lower middle table would have been a very achievable result. And by the time the Premier League came around, of course, we'd have had 2 or 3 seasons in that league and become more established. So the course of history may have been changed forever. Who knows? And I just remember being in the committee room at Villa Park when they delivered that decision, and behind the person who read that statement out, and I read the statement before he read it out, and what do you say at a moment like that? Your heart sinks and down through the floor it goes. You know, extraordinary.
Were you on air when were you reporting on it?
Yeah, I was. Yeah. And part of you is doing the reporter's job, but part of you is also as a fan. You know, and you got to be dispassionate, but not dispassionate at the same time. But we all, you know, we have to go through that. We go through all the protests. We go through all the, you know, the emotion of that. Eventually, we're put back into Division 2. So then, of course, another era after Aussie eventually goes off to Newcastle, Glenn Hoddle comes in. You don't go to Australia till 2009, so I assume you're still around for the Hoddle era.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, I sort of, you mentioned my age earlier, and, you know, I am still relatively young, but, you know, the things do start to collapse, sag, you know, turn grey, and you kind of you grumble. Well, I sort of grumble about getting old sometimes, but I'm so lucky that I was able to enjoy that era of Ardiles, then Hoddle, and just to imagine having a manager like Glenn Hoddle at Swindon now is ridiculous. And again, the football that we played, the football he played, is astonishing. And yeah, I was at the absolute right age then to enjoy it. I was 17, 18, so still full of like youthful innocence, but old enough to, you know, be able to go into the pub and talk about it afterwards. I'm going to sort of giving an impression of myself as being a raging alcoholic here. But, you know, it's part of it, isn't it?
It is part of it. And there's long ball football, and then there's Glenn Hoddle long ball football, isn't there? So 2 totally different styles. I mean, this man could put it on a postage stamp from 70 yards, couldn't he? It was extraordinary to watch him.
It was, yeah. I mean, it's the only sweeper. I never saw him make a tackle, but you know, that the old cliche that he never had to, because he could read the game so well. And it's funny, there was so much tension in that promotion season coming towards the end. I was lucky enough to be at St Andrews for the 6-4 and at Prenton Park for the you know, the playoff semi-final second leg, and then the final, of course. And I'd invested so much emotionally in that season and in that run-in. I look back and I worry a bit about myself, how I would have coped if Paul Bowden hadn't scored that penalty, if Leicester had won. I don't know. It would have changed my character fundamentally, because it just meant everything. Meant absolutely everything. Like, I blew my A-levels. I was first year of my A-levels, predicted quite good grades. Second year, when that promotion campaign started, I just spent hours poring over the sort of league tables and thinking about all the permutations and just chatting about it with my friends, and ended up with rubbish grades. So I blame Glenn Hoddle for that. But thank you as well.
Worked out well in the end. We'll get onto all your artwork and everything in a little while, but I'm, you know, talking about people's footballing, if I might use the word journey, which I hate using but normally, but it is an extraordinary journey. And you mentioned the pub, but that's the whole point of football, isn't it? It's not just the game, is it? It's not just the 90-minute. It's the whole, and which is what we've missed over the last year or so. It's the whole thing, the whole social occasion.
Yeah, that's right. And at that time, you know, there's a group of 15 or 20 of us would go along, you know, this little group of friends, and it just meant everything to us. So when we went to Wembley, there was enough of us to hire a coach, and I think we were the first bus there, and you know, the last one out, and then the party in town afterwards. And you know, you grew up in Swindon, and you never expect to see just such an outpouring of happiness, or sort of Victoria Hill, just the whole streets full of people, and you know, everyone waving to you as you're driving back on the motorway bridges. It's, like I say this unashamed, well, I say unashamedly, slightly ashamed. I don't think my partner can hear me, but it remains the best day of my life, I think. And you know, that might be a bit sad. I haven't got kids. That might maybe that explains that. But yeah, it was just the perfect day. Although I still can't bring myself to watch that Leicester comeback, because it's still so harrowing. And once the first one went in, you know, even at that age, I'd spent long enough to know Swindon. I spent long enough watching Swindon to know that, okay, when you're 3-0 up and the other team score one, you start thinking, you might be in trouble here.
Yeah, and, so it is a dodgy scoreline, because I remember being at Port Vale when Port Vale were 3-0 up and thinking, well, that's the end of that game. And then Swindon come back. And you mentioned the Birmingham game. So 3-0 is a dodgy old scoreline, because obviously one team sort of relaxes, doesn't it? Yeah, an extraordinary match, an extraordinary day in the history of the club. It led to going up to the Premier League, of course, which, all right, you're in the Premier League, and I've often heard this said, you know, we're just going to go up and enjoy it. Well, do you enjoy being thrashed every week? I don't know. It's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there were great days within that season, but it was a bit of an ordeal, if we're honest. I think, especially those first 4 fixtures. I mean, I went up to Bramall Lane. My friends and I went up there for that first game, and you know, being there, and it was 1-1 for quite a while, I think. And we thought, okay, we might be okay, and we lose 3-1, and then next game we lose 1-0 at home to Oldham in the last minute, and then there's a couple of thrashings, 5-0 against Liverpool and 5-1 at Southampton, and you think, okay, this is going to be humiliating. You know, it's going to be a rough trot. But you know, they picked up the odd result here and there, and as I say, there were some great days. I think, and seeing Swindon playing it in, you know, league matches in places where you would never expect to, like Old Trafford and Highbury and Anfield, and yeah, all over White Hart Lane, you know, and they picked up a few points here and there, and I was thinking about the decision to keep John Gorman, to, you know, when the chairman tapped him on the shoulder and asked him if he wanted to stay, and at the time it seemed like a good idea, but then, you know, with hindsight, I wonder what someone else could have done, but you know, you never know.
Because there was a moment which I think for an illustrator probably was gold dust, and that, of course, is the sending off of Eric Cantona, who I think many of us will remember now to this day, as he stands there and says to the referee, "I am Cantona, you can't send me off." It was an extraordinary moment, wasn't it? And I think if you look back at the history of Swindon in the Premier League, that is one of the standout moments for no other reason. It was just pure theatre, wasn't it? Yeah,
that's right. I think that game, did a cartoon for The Guardian last year during the first lockdown when football was cancelled, and they asked me to do like a few nostalgia pieces. I think lots of people who were writing about football at the time were doing those, and they'd asked me to do my favourite game, and I'd wanted to do the one about the playoff final, but someone else had already been commissioned to do that, and they did an absolutely brilliant job, better than I could have done. And so I wrote about that 2-2 draw at Manchester United. So much drama on and off the field. It was wild. I think I remember coming out of the old Shrivenham Road stand after the game, and it's just like a scene like something from Braveheart, because, you know, that Manchester United travelling support, the whole idea about Man United having, you know, the whole sort of prawn sandwich cliche and all the rest of it. Their travelling support was, you know, could be quite nasty. And, you know, whenever a big club was in town, there'd sometimes be trouble. But I remember just seeing this wild scene outside of them. So, okay. And sorry, I don't know if you want me to get into this.
Yeah, go on.
It's not going to turn into like a, as you can probably tell from looking at me, it's not going to turn into like a Hooli confession kind of thing. But a friend of mine got punched. My friend of mine was only 15, and he got punched square in the nose by a United fan who just walked past and punched him in the face, and immediately got arrested. And while my friend was sat in an ambulance, went to take him to hospital because he'd broken his nose, a policeman came in with blood pouring out of his hand, and my friend said to him, "Yeah, you know, what happened to you? Did you get stabbed?" And he said, "No, I let my dog off his lead, and he ran in a huge circle all around the field, came back and bit me right in the hand."
Ow!
So, yeah. So, but yeah, it's a wild day, and that was just one example. And as you say, Cantona getting sent off, and yeah, that was probably I think that was maybe the highlight of the season, that game.
It was an extraordinary match, and I just remember, I think it was Clive Tilsley who was doing a commentary on Match of the Day, saying, "And that's the first one. It's only taken 12 minutes," as if it was going to turn into a thrashing, and it didn't, and it was an extraordinary game.
Yeah.
Right, so let's move forward, because 2009 you moved to Sydney. I mean, I don't know if it might have been personal reasons you don't want to talk about it, but you are in Sydney, so I must ask why you live in Sydney.
My partner's Australian, so yeah, we met in London, and then a few years later we moved down here. So and actually, I've only physically seen Swindon Town play 3 times since. So I've come back a few times on holiday and only seen them, and I haven't seen them win. So the last time I saw Swindon actually win a game was a 3-2 win at the Withdean in 2009, April 2009. And it's just amazing. I mean, you look at where Brighton are now and where we are, and in fact, it's sort of that lower league petty jealousy that I still cling on to. I can't quite bring myself to be happy for Brentford, even though I understand it's a great story, and they're a nice club, and they do good things, and I just think, why isn't that us? All these clubs that have beaten us in the playoffs, or we've been, engaged in scraps in the lower leagues with. And you just see them rise. Like Burnley, I know they're a famous old club, but we used to beat Burnley all the time. And Bournemouth, what Bournemouth doing up there? I know they're not there anymore, but it's just. Yeah. I'm glad this is the only forum that I can come on and really and. That you understand, you get what I'm saying, right?
I do, totally, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned Leicester; they just won the FA Cup, for goodness' sake. They won the Premier League, for goodness' sake. And there we are back in League Two, which anyway, I'm looking forward to Harrogate and Barrow and anything else ending in O. It's like it's just here we are back again in the basement. So let's talk about your career, because it is an extraordinary thing. How do you get a gig then? There we are. You are an illustrator. You've gone from the fanzine. How does it work that you get a job with The Guardian? How does that physically happen?
So when I studied illustration at uni in the 90s, and then I left, obviously graduated, and spent a couple of years trying to pick up jobs here and there. Didn't really happen. I mean, this is in the really early days of the internet, and days where you'd have to go and physically make an appointment, go and show your portfolio and sort of sell your work and sell yourself a little bit. And obviously most of the print media is based in London. So there's a lot of trips from Swindon to London. I went to uni in Cardiff, I should say, and then moved back to Swindon afterwards. And I was a little bit lost, to be honest. And one of the gigs I had was one of the illustration gigs I had was at Swindon Town, They did. They wanted a poster of all of their strips. So I met up with Dick Mattick, and he gave me some great old photographs. And as I say, this is like before the internet kind of thing. So I meant actual research that Dick had done. I should add. I didn't really do anything.
Right.
So I mean, that was a great project, but it took me so long that eventually someone at Swindon Town said, "Oh, we've actually got a job going in the ticket office. If you want to come and work here part time." So I did that for a bit. I did that for a season, and so that was pretty good. While I was there, they knew that, you know, obviously I like drawing, and they asked me to design a new mascot, which is where Rockin' Robin came into being, which I didn't get a single penny for. That's fine. I wouldn't expect it. I mean, I was barely earning minimum wage, so yeah, that's okay. I'm astonished that Rockin' Robin is still going. And I actually preferred the version before the one I did. It was more sort of rounded. It looked more like a robin. Like the one that I did was not good, but it's still there. I think it's had maybe a couple of stitches here and there, and some new felt sewn into the hat, kind of, or the head. But yeah. So anyway, I worked at Swindon for a bit, and then I moved to London in 98. Yeah, 1998, because I knew that I was coming back and forward from Swindon to London the whole time, so it made sense to be in London. But it didn't really happen for me. I was only picking up jobs here and there as an illustrator, and had a full-time job. I started working at West Ham, started working in their ticket office.
I was going to say, because not only did you do Rockin' Robin, but you were also responsible for Herbie the Hammer. Is that right?
Herbie the Hammer, yeah. Another terrible thing that I've inflicted on the world. So yeah, when I designed Herbie the Hammer, like the company that made the costumes, they wanted my design of Herbie in an action pose. So I drew him like head in the football, looking up, bouncing the ball with his head. And when they made the costume, they'd followed it to the absolute letter, and they had it with his pupils permanently fixed upwards. So if he was forever sort of looking round, sort of slightly dazed and distracted, it's a weird thing. And I did a few things for that company, the mascot company, and eventually they asked me to design a female cat for Bristol City. And as a Swindon fan, I thought, oh, okay, I'm really selling my soul here. So I thought, because it was paying really badly as well. I think I was getting maybe 20 quid for a design, and I think maybe I got 30 if it actually got made into a costume. So it wasn't brilliant money. And with the Bristol City one, I thought, okay, I'm gonna draw something just ridiculous enough that it gets made, and then Bristol City will be lumbered with this terrible mascot forever. But I lacked the discipline to rein it in, so I drew something that was this mangy looking cat that it didn't get accepted, and in fact they didn't ask me to draw anymore. So,
well, I just got a picture here. There is Herbie the Hammer. Yeah,
Herbie the Hammer,
and there is the eyes looking up. Yeah. Yep. So there we are.
Yep.
And forgive me, but is he still there? I don't know. Is he still being used? Oh, he's gone.
No. They replaced him with sort of more action figure, sort of more of a what's it called, like Iron Man kind of
all right
thing. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So yeah. Let's then take that decision to go to Australia. You mentioned, I mean, how difficult is it? I mean, I hate missing Swindon Town games. I hate it. You know, I tell you how much. But how bad was it for you? I
remember being really worried about it. And when I was sort of starting mulling the idea of coming, I was talking to one of the London Swindon fans it's actually funny you mentioned Brentford. I was on your way into Brentford, and we were talking before the game, and said, "Oh, look, I'm thinking of moving to Australia, but I just don't know how I'll cope without this, without being here and the football and my friends." And he said, "Just do it. Just like I think it was actually at half time. I think it was a 0-0, and it was a pretty terrible game. And then he turned to me and said, you've got to go and do it, because this, as much as you love it, you'll regret it forever if you don't give it a go." And yeah, I think I built it up in my head to be such a big thing. And then once I got here, and it's not like in the 60s and 70s where it was impossible to keep up with what was going on, and there was no televised football here. You might get I think there was an hour highlights show once a week, but by the time I got here in 2009, with satellite TV and the internet and stuff, it's fairly easy to still watch a lot of the games, or at least follow it quite easily. My granddad, bless him, would still post me the league tables from the Sunday Mirror every week. And eventually I phoned him and said, "Look, you don't need to do it. I really appreciate it, but there's this thing called the internet now where I can see what's going on." But yeah, so it is hard. And in fact, the first season I was here, Swindon had that great run to the playoff final against Millwall, and I couldn't quite justify flying back for that, unfortunately. I'd only been here for a few months and money was tight. And I think if I'd said to my partner that I'm flying back to England for a couple of weeks or a week to go and watch Swindon play, I think she'd have told me to get a one-way ticket. So,
Well, the Charlie Austin bobble, I don't know if you've ever done an illustration of that, but I guess that would be one for you to do.
I think it's still too painful. There's only two, there's the only moment probably more painful than that would be the playoff semi-final against Brighton, where they played so well in that away game. And it's just so unlucky. There's little decisions to try and run the clock down. Mooney taking the ball into the corner when did he take the ball into the corner or did he not take the ball into the corner? I can't remember now. But there was one moment where you just think, oh, yeah, maybe that's where we lost it. Sort of coughed up possession and yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned the Withdean earlier, and I'm kind of one of these weird people who quite like the Withdean because it was just a weird football ground until that moment when Adam Virgo got that header. And I think I can still see him now, and he appears on television quite a lot, and I still get quite angry, really, about that moment, which, for a man in his 60s is a bit stupid, to be honest. But I think it was the wettest night I've ever experienced at football as well. It was horrendous. Great for a time, but...
Yeah, no. And that was it. I wasn't even at that game. I couldn't get a ticket because the away end was so small there, remember. It was it's probably only 1,000 tickets available. Probably not even that. There's that tiny sort of temporary stand in the corner. And so, yeah, I just watched it at a friend's house, another Swindon fan, and just absolutely devastated. I couldn't speak for about 3 days after that game until eventually, my partner gave me a bit of a dose of reality, which I sort of needed. She took the mickey out of me, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, it's probably time to stop grieving. And yeah.
But that's the thing, isn't it? You never do. I mean, there are moments when you look back on and they still... I mean, if you were to mention Wolves to me, I can still recall Alan Mays being felled by Paul Bradshaw, the Wolves goalkeeper, and it still makes me angry. And that second leg at Molineux still makes me angry now. Yeah. And it's ridiculous, really, all these years later, but it still gets to me. So, it's difficult to let them go, isn't it?
It is. And as we were saying earlier, like you look at the Premier League table, the Championship table, and all these clubs who've done us wrong. You sort of cling, like if you're still clinging onto it at your age, and I'm still clinging onto these things at my age, then you might as well just accept they're gonna be with you to the grave. So
they are. I'm guessing you mentioned the internet many times now, but I'm guessing that you could work wherever you want to now, can't you? It's not like, you know, you had to be wedded to your place of work in years gone by.
Yeah.
But you can work wherever you want to, I guess, as an illustrator.
I can, yeah. Yep. And it sometimes works to my advantage, because when I'm covering the games in England, they're often on in the middle of the night here. But I can get up, watch them in the morning, and then draw a cartoon about them. And while most of the people who read my cartoons are in the UK, so when they wake up on a Tuesday and they see that I've sort of written a cartoon about Monday night's game, they're thinking, how did he manage to do that? But I think the secret is out now that I live here. So that there's no mystery now. It's just the advantage of the time zone. Although I've been looking at the fixtures for the Euros, and most of the games are 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. So it's going to be a bit of a test of endurance.
So do you do have to watch them, I assume, to do whatever? Or
well, most of if people are familiar with the cartoons, most of the stuff I write isn't really about what happens on the pitch. It's about, you know, the more interesting stuff off the pitch, and things that go on in the boardroom or the dugout, or, you know, further afield or in the media. And something has to be quite spectacular to happen on the pitch for me to comment on it. So I generally, with the Premier League stuff, I generally get by with watching the highlights. And then if there's a big game, then I'll watch that. But last season, I found it really hard with no fans in the ground. It just, as I'm sure everyone feels that way, it really was a hard watch. And even with watching Swindon as well, so having the iFollow thing, being able to watch Swindon games here and there. Last season, I have to admit, you know, as the season dragged on, it was less enticing, and yeah, I sort of let it slip, to be honest. But the season before, I sound like such a glory hunter, but it's I think maybe it's the sort of the tyranny of distance and time, because I've been away from English football, physically been away for so long, that I don't recognise the names anymore. So, you know, it used to be if Swindon signed a player, you'd think, oh yeah, I remember him playing against us for, I don't know, Crewe or whatever. But now I think with such a turnover of players as well each summer, and we'll have another one this year.
Yeah, we will.
You'll have, you know, 10 new players, some loanees who you've not heard of from the academy, you know, a Premier League or a Championship club, and, you know, there might be a few sort of journeymen in there who you have crossed paths with. But because I've been away from it for so long, some of those names aren't quite as familiar to me. So I'm sure it will come back, but at the moment, like a lot of people, feeling pretty flat about Swindon.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there ever going to be a book purely devoted to Swindon? Because it's a very limited market, I guess, but
yeah.
You know, it is such an extraordinary history, as we've discussed throughout the course of this. You know, there are so many incidents that you as an illustrator it would be pure gold for you, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And I think as well, sort of my personal experience, the experience of the fans, I can definitely speak with authority on that, between the sort of period from, I don't know, 86 to 2009. But you know, that's a sort of more personal narrative, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to do that. I think I'm often pitching ideas to my agent for the books, and I haven't mentioned the idea of doing a Swindon Town one, but I know what it will say, so it might have to wait. That might have to be a retirement project, unfortunately.
And how, you know, looking back now, when you started on the fanzine, and you said that you weren't too chuffed with what you did originally, but looking back then and now, You must be delighted where your career's gone, mustn't you? I mean, as an illustrator, to get something in an internationally renowned newspaper is no mean feat.
Yeah, I mean, even sort of looking back, I started The Guardian in 2014, and I work as well for L'Equipe in France and Alpha Freunde in Germany, and I've done stuff all over the world. And even sort of 6 years ago, that seemed, hang on, let me just do my maths. 7 years ago, that seemed unimaginable. Like I always saw a measure of success would be to be able to do it as a job, and it's not particularly well paid, and the hours are long. I'm not sort of comparing myself to someone who does a real job of value to society, but yeah, to be able to I suppose use the skill that I think, to use my best skill on a daily basis is great. Although today I've drawn absolute rubbish, and I apologize to anyone who's going to read this cartoon tomorrow, because it's not a good one. Maybe I'll have another go at it in the morning. But so yeah, you do have those days where things don't go quite right, but I'd still rather be doing this than anything else. So yeah.
So what happens then if you submit something? Does the editor have the final say as to what goes in the paper, or what happens to that? With
the Guardian, I've got a brilliant editor. James Dart he's superb. He can be more supportive, and he really seems to. He gets my sense of humor, and he gets the references that I'm making, and occasionally he'll come back and there might be a joke which is doesn't quite work, and he might point that out. Or maybe if there's a legal issue, that's probably the biggest thing. Actually, isn't editorial; it's legal. So I think I've broadly learned where the line is. There's a line that I can't cross, but there's some weeks where they'll come back and demand wholesale changes, and that's not always a great thing to be doing at like 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night, where the comedy gold isn't exactly flowing freely, Yeah,
I can imagine.
But yeah, I couldn't be happier. They're generally so supportive, and
yeah, fantastic. Well, David, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And again, if you see that in the bookshops, pick it up, because it's brilliant. And you've done the illustrated history of football, and there's another one as well. That was the first published book in 2016, and there's a subsequent one to that, isn't there?
There is, yeah. The follow-up was a year later, and it's called Hall of Fame. So the first one is like pretty much the whole history of football as told in 100 cartoons, and the second one focuses on individuals, so players, managers, coaches, that sort of thing. So and then the one that you're holding up there is a compilation of my Guardian cartoon, first 5 years of Guardian cartoons. So
brilliant.
Sorry,
and
away there. I apologise.
No, that's all right.
A bowl of water.
Yeah, fair enough. And you are planning to return to the UK at some point? Are you just a visit, or what are your plans?
Yeah. I mean, last time I was back was 2019. And yeah, I think if I can get out of Australia and back into Australia, so the border situation is pretty tight. So maybe might not be this year, but maybe next year. And definitely it would coincide with the Swindon game.
Yeah, let's hope travelling becomes easier for everybody in the not too distant future. David, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, welcome Chris back on to the stream. As you'll be aware, it's the start of the working day here for many people. Chris. So she's about to head to work.
Yeah.
So really appreciate your time, David. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Lovely to speak to you.
You're welcome. That was brilliant, and lots of memories to start a Monday morning off with.
Yeah.
We did have a comment from Paul Bundy going back to the Man United game. Laurie Sanchez done his warm-up in the Man United end just to wind up the Man United days. It all started at the beginning. So.
Wow, okay. I didn't know that. Great.
Actually, one thing I should have mentioned, were you close to the Mark Hughes going into the crowd moment in the Shrivey stand?
Yeah, that was about 10 feet in front of me, yeah. And so in my mind, I'd always remembered it, that the guy who'd hit him was this massive bloke. But then I watched back the video recently, and that wasn't the case at all. So, but definitely, I do remember that all the Man United players came over to remonstrate, and then saw sort of how fired up the Swindon crowd were, and just sort of backed away and kept a very sensible distance of about 10 meters back. Just like players like Paul Ince and Roy Keane, even like hard men like that were thinking, okay, there's not actually a very tall fence here, so maybe we'll just step back and let it come down.
Brilliant. Absolutely
we made Roy Keane back off. Woohoo!
Yeah. I'm sure he'd deny it.
Yeah, we should claim that one. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you very much, Vic, as always.
Thank you, Chris.
So that's the end of this on the sofa. Just a couple of things. If you are a member, your renewals are due, so get those in for the membership if you can. We haven't got any more on the sofas planned, but of course, with things as they progress through the court cases, fixture lists and things like that, we will put on social media when we next have anything. So please keep an eye out. Anyway, enjoy your day, everybody, and we will see you soon. Bye.